Today, we're going to learn about lab equipment. Turn to page 5 in your booklet.
In a second, you will see some pictures pop up on your screen. Find these items in your tote and place them in front of you.
While you are waiting, put on your goggles and your lab coat.
Pause the video until everybody is ready. Now that you've gotten your lab equipment out of your tote, let's talk a little bit about each piece and what it's used for.
First, find your beaker. You have a big beaker and a little beaker. We're going to use these in lab to measure liquids. You might measure them in cups or milliliters or ounces.
The cool thing about your beaker is it comes with a lid. The lid has 2 pour spouts. If you line up your beaker with the first pour spout, the open hole, you can pour a lot of liquid at once. If you line it up with the ones with the dots, you can pour a little bit of liquid at once. Try to practice turning your lid and taking it on and off of your beaker. The next item we have is our test tubes and test tube racks. Test tubes are also used for measuring liquid, but not quite as much liquid as we saw in the beakers. These are really cool for experiments where we want to make lots of colors. You have 1, 2, 3, 4 test tubes and 1 test tube rack in your tote.
You also have a lid for each of your test tubes. Next, we have a funnel. Funnels are used to transfer your liquids into a smaller space. For example, you're going to need to pour liquid into your test tube. So you place the funnel in and slowly pour your liquid from your beaker. When you're finished, you set your beaker down and you remove the funnel.
This prevents spilling in the lab. The next thing you have are tweezers. Sometimes you'll hear a funny word for tweezers called forceps. Maybe if you go to the doctor to get a splinter taken out, that's what the nurse might call it. But these are tweezers. Tweezers are used for picking up tiny objects like rocks or pop rocks or even tiny bugs.
You have a set of measuring spoons. These will be used throughout your experiments to measure things. Maybe salt or flour or water. They can measure liquid and dry materials. Every measuring spoon has amount written on them. It's kind of hard to see, but if you look really closely, it will either be in teaspoons or milliliters.
In addition to your 4 test tubes, you also have 4 pipettes. 1, 2, 3, and 4. You will use the pipettes to transfer liquid from your beaker into your test tube. To use a pipette, you squeeze the head and the liquid will enter the pipette. And then you will squeeze again to release the liquid that you just took up.
Don't worry, we'll practice this later. You've probably seen this piece of equipment before. This is a magnifying glass. This is going to be used to view things very close.
This piece of equipment is called a stirring rod. Sometimes at home, maybe you're making chocolate milk and you use a spoon. This is similar to how we use a spoon. Let's say that we want to mix something up in our big beaker. We will use our stirring rod. Some of the experiments you'll do, you'll have to stir and stir and stir. So make sure you have your patience cap on.
And finally, we have a Petri dish. It is a clear container that opens up and is used for viewing chemical reactions. We'll talk about this more later.
Did you know, Miss Lindsay, that the Petri dish was named after a scientist whose last name was Mr. Petri? And the cool thing about that is if you make a discovery like Mr. Petri did in science, You might get something named after you too.
That's pretty cool. Now let's practice. Get your big beaker and fill it halfway with water. Pause the video until everyone is ready. All right, first take your lid and put it on your big beaker. Turn your beaker to the open spout. Hold it with your finger and carefully pour a little into your small beaker. It doesn't matter how much, we're just trying to test it out. Now turn your lid to the holy side. Again, hold your finger over the lid and pour into your second beaker. You should have noticed that the water came out faster when the hole was bigger. Next, grab your funnel. Place it into any one of your test tubes. Take one of your small beakers and pour all the water very carefully into the funnel. When you're done, remove your funnel and set it on your desk. Next, we're going to try the pipette. You can pick any of the 4 colors. I'm going to go with green. First, squeeze your pipette. Then, put it into the water. Release your pipette. You should have noticed that it filled up with water. Now go back to any one of your test tubes and squeeze it. Try to squeeze it very lightly to make 1 drop come out. Now squeeze it as hard as you can. And all the water comes out. Last thing we are going to practice, get your stirring rod and your big beaker. When we need to stir things, you put it in your water and stir, just like a spoon. Now you're all set and ready to move on. Now turn to your journal to page 6. Can you put on your goggles? If you can, check yes. Can you button your lab coat? If you can, check yes. Can you clean up your lab area? Of course you can. Check yes. Now we are going to pause the video while we clean up. All water is going to be poured down the sink. When everyone is ready, press play. Now that you're cleaned up, return all of your lab equipment to your tote. Let's review. Say the answers out loud. These are called goggles. Hopefully someone got that right. These are called beakers. Measuring spoons, and tweezers. Now that you've learned about lab equipment, work with your grown-up to complete page 6. We'll see you soon.